My story is about the hard times of severe and groveling poverty did to me and a generation that grew up knowing the Great Depression. How does one tell the story of the Great Depression? Of 10 years of futility, a decade of hopelessness called the dirty 30s. I left my home in Blueberry Mountain in northern Alberta on April the 1st, 1934. I was 17 then. Blueberry Mountain had lost its first boy to starvation, red lines, flop houses, soup kitchens, hopelessness, and despair that led to years in relief camps, riots, and ultimately prison. I was broke. It was my lot. I accepted it, and unafraid of the bleak future, I strode down the tracks to learn all about the outside and the Great Depression that was already into its 5th year. It was to be a grim and frightening pathway straight into the core of this disaster that no one could understand and none of us could overcome. The cold, twin steel rails of the CPR tracks would become my future highway to nowhere as I rode the rods with thousands of others. We were classed as transients on the bottom rung on the ladder of Canadian society. We were excess men looking for jobs that did not exist. Each freight carried a dismal and dejected load of human cargo east and west, drifting back and forth like an endless tide from coast to coast. Single and unemployed could not get welfare or city relief. They could be better controlled if they were placed outside in the cities in work camps. The police too wanted to keep us moving to the other ends of the country, to another city, anywhere but where you are. The word seems to keep them moving. They don't belong here. It turned into a hopeless, hungry line of ever drifting young transients that eventually became known to some as the lost generation. I worked in relief camps in BC, and in the spring of 1935 I found myself on the prairies. Everywhere in the streets of Winnipeg, one can look overhear the talk of the unveiled movement, a movement that had began in the relief camps of BC. It was brought on by several factors, principally short-sighted policy of relief and nothing beyond that by the government of Harvey Bennett. He was a CPR lawyer turned politician who seemed to be quite willing to sweep the young unemployed into the relief camps and jails and soup kitchens. As soon as the march began, he called us troublemakers and worse, homeless. Another fact that we were the young men of the nation spending our lives in isolated camps with no hope of it ever ending. Why not follow leaders that may get you work with a livable wage? We too want to live and are tired of this farce. The last factor was like a magnet that drew us all together. Adventure. Pictures of freight trains loaded with young men heading east blazed in the papers on the Winnipeg streets. I hurried to the exhibition grounds on the north side and joined. As the Ottawa Trek freights moved east throughout BC and Alberta, every stop added more men to the rising tide of dislike and even hate of the Bennett government. And it too was beginning to move all the police it could muster west. Regina became the focal point. Here in this very city, the movement was to be halted. The idea of a trainload of men, perhaps 2,000, joining forces with another 1,500 in Winnipeg, and all proceeding east to Ottawa became unthinkable to the authorities. And as we know that Dominion Day, the Trek was attacked and disbanded by the police in Regina. But it did not end there. In Winnipeg, we prepared to become the head end of the movement. A tag day had been held and the public had been generous. We cannot use the freights. The police are determined to keep us out of all the railroad yards. Our leaders switched tactics and rent about 30 old buses. But we were in for a real surprise when we arrived at the Manitoba-Ontario border. There the ride ended. The buses slowed and then stopped. Their contract was fulfilled, the driver said, and besides, they were not licensed to operate in Ontario. In a moment, we were dumped out in the bush, at least 35 miles from Kenora. About noon the next day, they did arrive in Kenora, a river of men flowing east in a movement that was to end in this tiny village as the federal authorities built a dam of steel-helmeted armed police to protect themselves from the embarrassment of explaining they had no solution for the Canadian unemployed except the rumored sandbag gun nest set up along the train exit of the village. So the trek ended, but the memory of it has never passed. I want to leave this message for my family and their descendants for generations to come. Always learn throughout your lives and remember my old theory, it will always look better than mine. Thank you.
Permanent memory, an official recognition of the role that the On-to-Ottawa Trek played in our society. We thought that the 75th anniversary would be a good time to do that. We proposed to the Port of Vancouver, Port Metro Vancouver, that on the overpass, which overlooks the very place where the trek started, the CPR tracks at the north foot of Main Street, that there be a bronze memorial erected that will permanently recognize the importance and the sacrifices of the trek and the trekkers. And so what we would like to do is to ask Ken Hogarth and to be joined by Elaine Thompson as a representative of all of the many members of the Trek families that are here to do the honors and to actually unveil the bronze memorial plaque.
We do have a little more program to get through, so we'll have it up here afterwards. You'll certainly have an opportunity, and we also are going to invite you after to follow a procession with Solidarity Notes Labour Choir up to see the location where there's a photograph put on the overpass today to show you where it's going to be, so you can see the actual site. So has everybody got their photographs? Great. Okay, I'll let you have a seat again. I also want to, not on the program,